kind of what you do on a normal day. So you obviously, as you say, you're your own master of your destiny when it comes to nutrition now, rather than being suppressed with the previous, your previous job. So just walk me through very quickly a general day, what you choose to eat, what you're doing at the moment, so I get a bit of a picture of that.
Yeah, absolutely fine. So first in the morning, I tend to have, again, I try to get a bit of protein in the morning. That generally consists of something egg-based. So we're looking at either eggs on toast, or we're looking at an omelette, which I make up, which has probably 4 or 5 whole eggs.
Yeah.
Sometimes I push 6, which is a bit crazy, but 6 eggs with some oats whisked together, and that makes a nice little healthy omelette. And that tends to start my day.
So what time would that be, if you don't mind me asking?
It's like 8 o'clock in the morning.
Right. And you're looking at eggs, and then you were saying you were having like a slice of toast. Yep. Is it anything else with your omelette? So when you're having your omelette, let's times that by between 4 and 6. But with your omelette, are you having anything else, such as you're having toast with the omelette as well? No.
It'll either be the carbohydrates involved in the breakfast will either be oats or a slice of toast.
Right, okay.
So
yeah.
It won't be oats and a slice of toast.
Yeah, okay.
But I think what you're getting at is there anything additional to that? And there'll normally be a sauce on the side, whether it's a bit of barbecue sauce or a little bit of ketchup on top.
Yeah, with either omelette or eggs on toast. Yeah, okay. Then moving on, also includes things like snacks as well. So if you tend to have things that you turn towards, it can be whatever you do. You may not. You might say, no, I stick religiously to 3 meals a day or whatever. So just go through what your next natural thing would be.
3 meals a day. I don't snack a lot, but I will throw in a protein shake into the mix as well. So if we took a typical day, that would be breakfast. Then I will go probably to the gym middle of the morning.
Yep.
Okay. And then following the workout, I would then either grab from the gym one of those little bottles of fuel shakes.
Okay.
Or make up a protein shake from a whey protein powder.
Yeah.
I have.
Okay, so protein shake and gym, that's sort of 10 a.m. And then from there, you're moving on to a lunch, I'm assuming.
1 or 2 o'clock, I'll then stop for lunch.
Yeah.
So it does work in the sleep.
And then what are you looking at in terms of lunch? Does it always differ, or is it?
Yes, it always differs. Well, not always differs, but there's variety in my lunches. So a common one would be something like spaghetti bolognese. I'll make up with a pack of mince, add some sauce, and some pasta. We've then got a very filling, quite large lunch, which again packs in the protein, some carbohydrates in there as well in the pasta.
Yeah.
I'll eat that.
And how much mince roughly? Do you know how many grams of mince?
So we're putting it quite hard at certain stages. So we are talking like a full pack,
500 grams. It's fine. So that's mince as well, baby.
Certain fat in it, obviously got the different variety, like 5%, 10%, 12%, 15%.
Yeah.
Always well.
You want your higher saturates anyway, which is good, and I'll discuss that with you a little bit later. What about dinner?
Okay, it is such a variety, but a typical would be a steak with some potatoes, maybe a baked potato and steak.
Yeah. Any
We mixed up though, so to cut you off, it could be mixed up, and I might have like a Thai green curry with rice and vegetables. So really, there is a variety in my evening meals, but I am very conscious of trying to keep that protein intake, and so just try to push that calorie surplus. So they're always quite large portions.
So how many times would you say you have curry, just out of interest?
Twice a week.
Twice a week, yeah. And then steak and potato and veg.
We're eating out quite a lot as well, so that comes.
So where's your eating out in terms of just on an average week? How much would you eat out? Once, twice? Yeah, twice a week. And then eat out. And then do you have a set thing that you try and go for, or?
Generally steak, to be honest with you.
Yeah, okay. Okay, let's one. Steak, veg, and some form of carbohydrate.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, okay. All right. So, to lose weight, as we were discussing before we started filming, is you're looking to try and rebalance. Your first initial target is to rebalance your hormones. There are two things in my mind that rebalance your hormones. The first thing is starting to clean up the diet, which you've already started to do because you start to choose better. You're not having a stressful lifestyle anymore, so that's good. The second thing is time, and I couldn't emphasize time enough. How long it's taken you and I to grow our businesses has taken a long time to understand that. It's exactly the same with nutrition. So to rebalance your hormones and start to see your body lose weight, you have to add on that in, which is why we suggested 3 months or 12 weeks. Yeah, okay. So how are your hormones, which is probably the question you're asking, how are your hormones imbalanced? Well, they were in balance. They would have been in balance. So your main hormones that would, I'm assuming, would be in balance were probably insulin, because you're probably having too much refined food, and then also cortisol because you've got too much stress. With cortisol, it's a stress hormone. And if it's spiked too frequently, too often, what it will do is it will break down your muscle tissue. So all that hard work that you do in the gym, if you've got a very highly stressful job, doesn't really matter. It actually doesn't balance itself out in favor of what you were trying to achieve, because your body will turn muscle tissue back into sugar, and that will then spike your insulin, but it'll also more likely store fat. So people who've got a lot of stress often put a lot of weight on. That's because they're stress eating, but they're also suffering with stress as well. So it's affecting their metabolism.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the first thing. So you're kind of sort of saying, if you took a really, really bad individual whose just diet was terrible and they got a terrible, really stressful job, you know, their hormones would be all over the place. And because of that imbalance of the equilibrium of hormones, weight is much more likely to be higher, and fat weight, okay, overall subcutaneous fat weight. So the other one is insulin. Now, insulin isn't just there to sort out carbohydrate, but because our diets are now so highly refined in terms of like the wheat that we have here with the toast, you've got a refined protein shake here, you've got your pasta. Is your sauce homemade? No. Okay. So that, you've got your rice as well. These things are starting to go against you. And the reason being, and I'll go into a little bit more detail, the reason being is that insulin will spike when blood glucose is spiked as well. So if I gave you a blood test and you'd fasted for 16 hours, and then I then made you eat a bacon roll, okay, then after having that bacon roll, it's going to increase your glucose and your insulin will go up from there, yeah? That's fine. But if you're constantly spiking it up and down, that's where weight starts to go on, and that's the imbalance of the hormone that I'm talking about, insulin. What you need to know, the most important thing out of all of this, what you really need to know is the fact that wheat, toast, and your pasta, okay, is made from what they call dwarf wheat. 99% of all crops across the world are made from wheat called dwarf wheat, and that was manufactured in the 1950s. Reason being is twofold. One, because there's a lot of starving populations after World War II, and the second reason is that normal wheat as it used to be back in the day, was really tall, sometimes taller than this ceiling, but it would fall and it wouldn't grow well, and it was always riddled with disease and stuff like that. So what they decided to do is genetically modify wheat to grow it shorter, much more stable, and able to replicate. Yeah. So now you've got this dwarf wheat. Now, what's the difference between normal wheat and dwarf wheat? Well, unfortunately for us, dwarf wheat is high in a starch called amylopectin A. You don't necessarily need to remember that.
Just to clarify, dwarf wheat is with the wheat that we see in the fields today.
Everything. If you wanted to get a non-dwarf wheat loaf of bread, you'd have to go online and find it, most likely. You wouldn't get it from your butcher, I'm talking about. You wouldn't get it from your baker. You wouldn't be able to find it in any store, really, unless you sort of said it was, I don't know, some form of oat-based, I don't really know. But majority, 99% of all wheat that's available worldwide comes from dwarf wheat. Because if you look at it from the farmer's pocket point of view, he's losing money if he grows normal wheat because it's more likely to not harvest well. There's a likelihood there. there's a lower likelihood that he's not going to be able to harvest if he chooses to have dwarf wheat, which is why, you know, the market there. Back to amylopectin A. So you don't necessarily need to know the name amylopectin A, but there are 3 starches: amylopectin A, B, and C. Amylopectin B, so they're all higher in the glycemic index, and I'll go into that in a second. So let's go to C. So amylopectin C would be things like beans, kidney beans, lentils, things of that nature, pulses, things like that you cook with. Amylopectin B will be your root vegetables, okay? So potatoes, sweet potato, parsnip, swede, they'll be your amylopectin B. Your amylopectin A is anything with basically this wheat in it. So you've got your toast and you've got your pasta, and if your sauce as well, and we're obviously talking about seriously trying to move in the right direction of losing weight, amylopectin A has got a higher glycemic index than sugar. So when you consume your toast, you're consuming a product that is going to spike your insulin much higher than sugar will. For wheat, for amylopectin A wheat, which is your toast and your pasta, you're looking between a marker of a 70 to 100, and the highest you'll ever find with sugar is 65. So wheat actually outweighs sugar in that regard. Now, if you're having a diet, if you can imagine someone who's having a diet of, see, you're consciously having protein, which is great. And I'm going to get onto the protein shake in a minute. But they're the first 2 things that I want you to know, because they're lifelines. If you start to manipulate your diet in a way which I'm obviously going to help you with later on, but if we start to look at saying, okay, well, it doesn't have to be toast, it could be the oats, or it could be something else, or it could be something as well as that I enjoy just as much and as easy to replace and also eat and consume in terms of preparation. That's really what, you know, we're going to do together. So does that make sense? Is anything?
It does. I mean, it's really quite interesting actually, because you mentioned that obviously toast and the pasta spike your blood sugar, your insulin.
Yeah.
Almost as I understand sugar would or should do. So always you describe simple carbohydrates, they're complex carbohydrates, but they're having the same impact.
So they're not complex, and the reason they're not complex is because they have been for a process. They're processed.
Okay.
Yeah. So I know what you mean. You mean that the wheat that they came from would, so if you ate the raw wheat of the farmer's field, technically it would give you a terrible stomachache, but it's been processed. Okay. So flour, yeah, let's put it in that way. Flour, if you consumed flour, let's say if you consume a donut, any pastry, pizza, toast, pasta, and unfortunately rice as well, and I'll go into rice in a second, they're all high in amylopectin A. So they're going to spike. So every day, you're unnecessarily spiking your insulin, which is imbalancing your hormone, which is making you store fat.
So whole wheat versions of each of those, obviously your white toast, your white pasta, what's the difference between those and then the whole wheat?
Whole wheat has got a bit more fibre in, but it's very minuscule. It's hardly anything. They kind of put it on the pack there to kind of make it sound as if it's really healthy for you. Here's the irony. The irony is that whole wheat versions of, let's say, a loaf of bread compared to your white loaf, the wholemeal is higher in amylopectin A again, because it's got more of the wheat that you're eating from the dwarf wheat. And you'd think that the white one would be the culprit, and I'll go for brown. You know, unfortunately not.
You go would be.
Yeah, well, that's what they want you to. That's what they want you to think, because they want you to think that you're buying into your health by choosing that product. Do you see what I mean? The other thing with bread is as well, if you're buying it off a supermarket shelf, you know, it's 4 ingredients to make bread. If you look at the back of any pack, like say Warburton's, you'll see about 17 to 20 ingredients on there. You got, you know, all sorts of different preservatives and stuff like that.
So that's
stablers and all that shite. So let's look at rice. Rice is also, unfortunately, amylopectin A. However, I'm not against rice. I'm not really against pasta. I'm not really against any of it. But if we want to seriously move and shift there, then what we're going to do is we're going to find ways that we can either work around it or work it out for the moment in terms of work it out of the diet and put it to one side and say, we're not going to touch that for the moment because it's just not beneficial to what I'm trying to do, because you're going to have to work twice as hard to get the result that you want, and there's no point. Rice is high in amylopectin A naturally. However, I feel that with rice, as long as you've got a portion of it and it's not a huge amount, so it's not making up 1/3 of your plate, that you should be having high amounts of protein. And I can't stress enough the amount of vegetables that you should be consuming. If you think you're consuming enough, I pretty much guarantee most people aren't. Yeah, okay.
5 a day sort of thing, or just?
I would say more. What I would do is, rather than sort of say, Christ Almighty, you know, I'm eating vegetables, I'm eating a stick of celery as a snack. Don't do that. But in your meals, have really big portions, and we're going to go into that once we get into intermittent fasting and the ketogenic diet. I just want to kind of clear up this bit a little bit. Protein shake. Protein shake, I'm just going to underline it for the camera. You tell me, what is a protein shake?
Whey protein isolate, probably a lot of sugars and flavourings, and then packed out with milk as the mixing of liquid.
What is it at its baseline? At its base, what is it? It's refined. It's refined. If it's been refined as highly as whey protein is, when you cook an egg, you're changing the structure of the egg by heating it. You can't eat a raw egg; it will make you ill, or could make you ill. So you heat the egg and you cook it, but you're changing the molecular structure of the egg and the proteins within that. So you're losing already some of the proteins just by heating it. Yeah, but you've got to heat it to be able to consume it. So let's say an egg has got 7 grams, for argument's sake, of protein. Is your body getting that full 7 grams? No, because you've heated it. You have to. Yeah. Same with, mince. You've got 500 grams of mince. You look on the back of the pack and it says, this 500 grams. It's a very big serving. So let's say, for argument's sake, you're getting 150 grams of protein, which is huge. But you've got to cook it and your body's got to process it. Yeah. Your body's got to break that down. It's got to break down the fiber of the meat. Even more so if you're having steak. If you're having steak, it's the original cut of the animal. So the fibers inside that it's gonna take some time to break that down. Protein shake, excuse my French, but takes fuck all digestion because it's already been processed. So first of all, are you getting the protein that they're saying on the back of the pack? Not at all, because it's been so highly refined and processed and drilled down to its very core element, that again, the packaging and the way it's marketed and the way it's sold and the isolate and the blah, 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 and the extra added vitamins that they're adding in, you're much better off with whole food every single time, okay?
The message that's given, sorry for injecting here, but the message that's given is that after you break down your muscles, you have a hard workout, your muscles are demanding at that point an injection of building materials, i.e. your proteins, your sugars, just to replenish them after the hard workout. And that's how the message is given from the market.
Completely understand that. And that will have come from marketing to try and market this. But if you have a workout where's your gym workout? Here's your workout. Let's move your workout back to 6 a.m. in the morning. Okay. And then you don't eat anything until you get to your steak here. The protein that your body needs will get it from the steak there. Your body just doesn't stop doing things because you can't eat. It's a much more resourceful machine than that. And thank God it is. If you're healthy and you're having a healthy diet, which you pretty much are, I'm not picking your diet apart. We're just trying to find some little tweaks. It's not going to make an ounce of difference between having a protein shake after your gym than to waiting 2 to 3 hours and going home and having a nice, decent meal with some whole protein in it, because it hasn't been broken down. The other problem with, sorry to interrupt you, but the other problem is with protein shake is because it's refined, it does what?
It gets processed quickly.
Spikes your insulin. So insulin, I'm not going to include the rice quite so much, but you can see how a pattern starts to form, because insulin is also spiked when you're consuming highly refined protein. Well, the other thing with protein is as well, it's had the fat stripped out of it, and your body needs the fat, and fat is a buffer towards insulin. So you've got a big insulin spike coming along, put some fat with that meal, put some vegetables and fiber with that meal, you're slowing everything right down.
What about milk?
Milk's great. Milk's great.
Is it? Okay.
Milk's great because it's got its fat in it. So always have full fat. Don't be scared of it. Don't worry about your calories. Okay, I'm going to calories in a minute. Have full fat. If you don't like full fat, then semi-skimmed, the green top is fine. But milk's brilliant. It's natural. It's okay. It has been, to a degree, it's been processed because it's been cleaned. Okay. And if you didn't know, what they do with milk is they strip all the fat out of it and they actually put the fat back in to meet the requirements, but that doesn't really matter. So all milk is skimmed and then they add the fat back in. Oh, that doesn't matter. However, nonetheless, yeah, milk's great, I think. I think it's got all its rich amino acids. So when you're looking for protein, and what a lot of people get confused with, especially people who like a vegetarian diet and, vegans, not really sure about vegans, but let's say vegetarians, what they do is they sort of say, well, let's print your protein inside my vegetables. Well, there are, but by the time your body's broken down that vegetable, it's not actually the same amount of protein. The transfer isn't as good. So whenever you want to have something like milk, you're definitely getting all 9 amino acids. So there are 9 essential branch chain amino acids that your body needs. And you get them in your animal products, such as your mince, and you get them in your eggs, and you get them in your steak, chicken, anything like that. And also the derivatives of animal products, so milk, cheese, natural Greek yogurt. Butter isn't a protein, but butter's a fantastic fat because it's full of saturates, which is really important. So I'm repeating myself a little bit, but what we're looking to do is try and cross some of these out and replace, not remove, but replace with other things. And that's what we'll do. And we'll catch up with that another time. So how do you feel about that? I know it's a bit of a mess.
I understand why you've gone through the process that you've gone through.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So in terms of your eating pattern, because we've kind of got some times here. So you've got your 8, your 10, 1 till 2, and then you've got an evening meal, whatever time that falls. Let's talk about time first. Time's really important when it comes to the body. What have you been doing? Because I think we did say before we started filming, I think you said that you maybe had taken on a little bit of intermittent fasting, or is that me hearing that?
Previously, I have tried intermittent fasting, and I actually get on board quite well with it.
That's what you said.
I don't mind waiting till a meal 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Prefer to backload my meals than eat a lot in the morning and not much in the evening. I feel a lot more satiated, and thus I want to go to bed on an empty stomach. I'd rather have a larger evening meal and lighter meals throughout the day. I actually really enjoyed doing intermittent fasting in the past, to be honest with you, and I find that late morning you actually find a lot of mental clarity if you haven't eaten since dinner the previous night. And that's something I would quite enjoy getting back on board with if we're going to go through this process, and might either push back that breakfast or just forego it completely and just rearrange the timing somewhat.
Yeah. So let's go back to wheat. Comes from agriculture. So before the agricultural revolution, which we've had about 10, 11,000 years ago, we'd have pretty much been the classic hunter-gatherer. Now, there's lots of argument between were we hunter-gatherers or were we this, that, and the other. It doesn't really matter, but let's just say we certainly weren't harvesting our food. We were sort of going out and catching it. It's whatever we had. It would have been seasonal. So we've eaten more fruit in the spring and summer because it would have been available. Wouldn't have been available in the winter, not like it is all year round now. So pre-agriculture, if there's not the availability or abundance of food, you naturally will fast because it's not there. Does that make sense? So you've got to eat when you can. Okay, if you go back to pre-agriculture, so you and I would be exactly, the makeup of the human body hasn't changed, dramatically for that 10,000 year period. It's a very short amount of time in the human evolution or any evolution. But in terms of our food, what we consume has changed galaxies. It's gone out of the stratosphere. So it's hugely changed. And that's why we're suffering with metabolic diseases such as type 2 diabetes, dementia, cancer and strokes and heart attacks. So when you go back in time, you have to look back to be able to understand what the human body is. Intermittent fasting, quite literally, is exactly what we should be doing, because that's what we would have been doing, and that's what our evolution is governing for us. Do you see what I mean? It's trying to do that, but because we've got the availability of whatever we can eat, choosing to do IF is, I wouldn't say it's natural, but I would say it's definitely something that's going to fit what you're trying to achieve in losing weight. Because at the moment, you're eating 4 to 5 times a day. So you're even if you're just eating eggs 4 to 5 times a day, you're still spiking insulin. It has to do something. So that's the thing. Now, what I want to quickly talk about really quickly is the time. So if you look at the time of intermittent fasting, most people, when they start intermittent fasting, the one that's quite famous is the 12-8 diet, which is 12 p.m. till 8 p.m. Yeah, okay, so it's 8 hours. It's the 8-hour window that they're looking to achieve. Where that study came from was from rats. So these rats were basically split into 2 groups. There were ones that were fasted and ones that weren't. The ones that fasted lost weight, and they were fasted between the hours of 12 till 8 p.m. Okay, the overall mass of a rat compared to the overall mass of a human is multiple times bigger. We are huge. Our metabolisms are much bigger. So if I do an IF diet with you and I say, right, Ben, I want you to do 12 to 8, okay, you will make some initial changes, but actually the window isn't small enough. So we're going to narrow it. Now, because I want you to restart it, if you're in agreement to it, I want you to start at 7. Okay, and I only want you to intermittent fast 3 times a week, because we're going to just slowly up it until it becomes normal. What I find with clients is they do intermittent fasting and they really bang on it for 2 weeks, and then they start to lose their way. So through my experience, what I say, just intermittent fasting, choose your days you're going to intermittent fast, choose your window of time in that 7 hours. So your 7 hours could be 2 till sort of 7 p.m. That's 2, something like that. So no, that's 2 till, what is it, 2 till 9? Yeah, 2 till 9. So you could start much later on in the day, and then go all the way through. It doesn't really matter, but you're gonna start your fast and you're gonna do 7 hours whenever you choose to start it, all the way through. And the next thing I want you to do is I want you to have just 2 meals. Your game is, you've got to try and fit most of this in those 2 meals. So what we've got to do, and what I'm going to do with you, is build a program that does that for you. Your macronutrients, which is the most important thing, not your calories, your macronutrients, your proteins, your carbohydrates, your fiber, and your fats, which are really important, are going to be built into those 2 meals. And the first meal that you have at, let's say, 2 p.m, when you break your fast, after you've had that, you're going to say, I can't eat another bite. I don't want anything until X p.m. when I've got to continue eating. So I will have my second meal. Because you're only eating twice, you're only spiking insulin twice. Okay, so you're only having 2 spikes rather than continuous feeds of spikes throughout the day. Does that make sense? So things like pasta and rice, we don't necessarily have to level them out, because we've chosen to do IF, because we're choosing to do intermittent fasting. The fasting's helping us out, because it doesn't really matter if your insulin's going to spike. It would spike anyway if you were to choose something that was slightly refined. You're eating a relatively clean diet. So the IF is kind of it's your ace in the hole sort of thing. It's working for you all the time, because when you're not eating for the other hours, when you're fasting and you're past your window and you're into a window of fasting, you're going to have to use some body fat as energy. Your body's going to have to start producing ketogens to be able to, which is the keto diet, and we'll go on to that in a second. It's going to have to start producing ketogens to be able to fuel the body, because the body still needs to be fueled. We just need to make sure we're getting enough fat and enough protein. and some fibre as well. The carbohydrate, we're going to tone down a little bit. In general, your carbohydrate will be slightly less, your protein will need to be slightly higher, and your fat will also need to be higher as well. Yeah. So I've probably blown your mind there a little bit. It's probably quite a lot of information coming at you in one go.
The question that came up to my mind when you started talking about intermittent fasting. Obviously, some people take this to the extreme. They do 4-day water fast and things and say it's very healing to do so. Your take is on that. And equally, off the back of that question, is there such thing as a body going into starvation mode and holding on to fat because suddenly there's been an extreme change? You mentioned about tapering this with 2 or 3 days for the first week until the hormone balances sort of equal out. But if one did it super extreme and straight away did a 20-hour fast, does the body fall into starvation mode? Does it try and hold on? Is that a thing, or is that just a term coined?
So, yeah, I am going to answer your question. I don't mean to be sciencey. Well, I'm trying to answer it as basically as I can. Your body produces new cells and old cells die all the time. So it's regulatory. Your body's constantly regulating what cells need to be destroyed and what cells need to be reproduced. So on balance, the weight of, if you do it in weight, the weight of cells that you lose compared to the generation of new cells that you gain should equal out. Yeah, okay. And that is just general maintenance and management of the body. When you fast, there is evidence to show that those dead cells will actually go into reabsorption of energy. So that's the first thing. The other thing is as well, it's giving your gut microbiome a big chance to resettle itself. Not that yours is destroyed by any means necessary. When you're looking at bad gut microbiomes, it's people who've been shoving really crap food down their throat for years. And the reason why they're tired, fatigued, stressed, got no energy to go to the gym, got no energy to do anything, is because they're suppressing themselves with what they choose to do. And that's what we talked about alcohol, wasn't it? But you said that once you gave it up at the beginning of this month or whenever that was, you were kind of sort of saying, actually, I feel really clear-headed. Well, that's because you haven't got a toxin inside you making your head fuzzy. You've taken it out and your body's processed it. Also gives your liver, I feel, a chance just to kind of recuperate and recover and just level itself back out. I'm not a massive fan of the IF going to the extreme of, let's say, 5 days, Monday to Friday, and I eat again at the next weekend. The reason being is that all works very well and good, but if you're going to do some explosive movements in the gym, or you come into a very stressful period, let's say that something happened to you personally that really is quite an intense moment of stress, you want some substance, I feel, to be able to manage that. But more importantly, if you're going to do sort of cardiovascular and you're lifting weights and stuff like that, I just don't think you're going to have the same amount of explosive power because you're not fueling it, okay? But at the same time, I don't disagree with having 4 to 5 days, but my argument would be, are you performing at all levels? Because this has got to be realistic to you. If you've got someone who said, yeah, I've done a 5-day fast and actually I felt on top of the world, yeah, but you didn't keep doing the 5-day fast. I've never met or heard of anyone who's done a 5-day fast forever. So done 5 days, then the weekend, and then the next 5-day fast, because you're then kind of getting into habits of binging, where you're binging on fasting and then you're binging on the weekend because you're having to make up all your fuel. Plus you expect your body to be then like, well, I want to take it to the gym. I want to be toned and muscular. I want to be lean. But so do you see what I mean? I think it's too extreme, in my opinion, which is why I suggested just doing a slow introduction to it. Because it's for me personally, with my diet, my eating, my gym habits and everything that I do, it's a lifetime commitment. It's a lifetime commitment. I hope to die standing upright, doing what I love doing, which is, training and teaching and coaching. But the nutrition, the sleep, the rest, the training, the life, all supports that. You can't get to that if you don't put your foundations first. It's Maslow's pyramid hierarchy of needs, yeah? Your base hierarchies: food, water, shelter, sunlight, socializing, sex, or reproduction, but food, yeah, food and nutrition is one of those ones. So to go back to your question, you can't do it to an extreme, but you've got to do it to what suits you and your individual. You could say, Chris, I do 7 days, 4 hours on, and the rest of the 20 hours, I fast for 20. I eat 2 meals in my 4-hour window, and that suits me perfectly. It gives me more time in my day to do the things I want to do rather than standing and preparing food. Completely understandable. But if you sort of say the 6-hour window works for me, and I can do that most days, sometimes I break it because look, life happens. I'm going to go out in the evening with my friends and I might grab a bite to eat. Is that going to make a difference to your overall weight? No. No. If you were doing it on a regular basis and you are fluctuating again, then you start to go back to this hormone imbalance where you're imbalancing the hormones because you're not sticking to that original IF. You're not sticking to your own agreement of doing IF.
You're making changes conducive to my lifestyle and what I'm likely to stick with. And actually, it makes sense to use a smaller window of time to eat because then you are more conscious about what you fit into that smaller window. And yeah, I like the sound of it.
Yeah.
Probably for me, as you say, 2 o'clock, having fasted since 8 the night before, probably fits me quite nice.
Yeah, yeah. So we're looking for a 7-hour window. And then, so literally, after we've done this today, we'll start for 7 days. And then on the following 7 days, whenever that falls, we'll then start to, or next week, we'll start to introduce 4 days. So it'll quickly go from 3 to 4 to 5. And then we'll see how you feel. Because after that, you might say, actually, I do the 5 days, Monday to Friday. I have the weekend to myself because I'm going to admit that I'm going to have my social life. You can't cut those things out. You can't expect someone to cut out everything. I think most people are willing to do some things to benefit their health, but they're not willing to sort of be, whatever, a Catholic nun and just, do nothing. So I feel it's important to be able to match what the individual wants to achieve, what they're capable of achieving, but also setting some lower standards to just meet regulatory and then come up from there and reintroduce, because doing another day on top of 3 doesn't seem like a hard deal. Do you see what I mean? Do you want me to go into ketogenic dieting quickly or?
I'd be really interested actually, because.
So, ketogenic dieting is quite simple. You're basically, as you pretty much know, is that you're cutting out carbohydrate quite heavily, or at least you're consuming more amylopectin B and C type carbohydrates, which you're doing here with the potato. I'm not too fussed on the rice, to be really honest with you. I'm just giving you information that it is amylopectin C starch. So when you say amylopectin, you may say, what the fuck does that mean? Starch. It's basically starch. We used to call sugar starch years ago. We never used to call it sugar. It only became sugar when they started to refine the stuff. And then we used to call it starches just out of general knowledge. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to knock out these ones here if you were to take up more of a keto style. With the keto diet, very much it's 3 main ingredients. It's whole protein or dietary protein. So dietary protein is anything from an animal, including the milk and the cheese and the yogurt that comes out of an animal when it's been, processed. It's having enough fat and making sure that you're getting monounsaturated fat and saturated fat. Where am I going to get those from? Butter and olive oil, okay? Seed oils are processed oil that has to be processed. So to be able to get a teaspoon of rapeseed oil was something like 8,000 seeds, just to be able to process it into a very small amount. So what you want to try and steer clear from, which you will do, is polyunsaturated. So in Latin, you've got poly, which means many. You've got di or di, which means 2. And you've got mono, which means 1 singular, okay? If you see something which is high, such as vegetable oil, and a lot of people are really scared of vegetable oil now, and there's a good reason, because it's high in polyunsaturated. Why is polyunsaturated bad? If you can imagine that I'm holding someone's hand, that's 1 single handshake. That's mono, which means it's just 1 chain linked together With poly, it's many different handshakes from all different sorts of people. But once you heat it to a certain temperature, those chains start to break away and the hands start to let go. They become more radicalized and then they start to oxidate inside your blood, which then has been proven to lead towards things like cancer, dementia, and blah, blah, blah. So what you want to stick to is your butter and your olive oil. Coconut oil is another great one as well, because they've both got the saturated fat and the mono unsaturated fat, and they're the fats that you want. And you want a good mixture of both. So I like cooking my mince in butter, but I like having my vegetables in olive oil. So I cook them in 2 separate pans because I think there's a little bit of flavour to butter. It's a little bit different, but olive oil is lovely as well. The third one, fibre, because you're not having as much carbohydrate. So for me personally, if you want to look at what I eat, I don't have any carbohydrate whatsoever. I don't have bread, I don't have pasta, I don't have rice, I don't have potatoes, I don't have any root vegetable as such, maybe parsnips and carrots here and there. All my carbohydrate comes from fibre. That's completely my choice. That's not something that I'm asking you to do at all. The reason why is because it's less taxing on my system in terms of me feeling bloated. So I used to have four slices of bread a day, like 2 sandwiches, and feel bloated all the time. And even though I was in the fitness industry and I'd constantly be feeling bloated, and quite often I'd be getting really, really badly constipated. And once I stopped all that, I went on a diet for about 12 weeks, and I actually had to cut, because the diet was so strict, I had to cut these things like sandwiches and stuff out, but I just never went back to them because I felt so much better. Yes, I put some weight back on and some body fat back on, but I felt a lot better for not having it. And slowly but surely, I've cut those things out. I'm not asking you or anyone else to cut out the things that they like eating, but what I am asking is for you're monitoring it better. So with the keto diet, what you're looking at is those 3 things: protein, fat, and fiber, which is quite easy to do. As much as you can make them dietary, so dietary fat, dietary protein. Your dietary protein is animal, your dietary fat is also animal because there's natural fat inside animals, but also your butter and your olive oil, coconut oil. Lard does come into it, but most people don't like cooking with lard. Those are the fats, and the vegetables are the vegetables. You knock yourself out with whatever ones you want. With me personally, I love seasoning my vegetables, so I season to the absolute because I think it makes it taste so much better. Yeah, okay, that's just my personal preference. Ketogens. What are ketogens? Basically, your body starts to use ketogens via function of the liver when there isn't as much free roaming glucose or sugar. So you've got free roaming sugar in the blood, and that's there all the time. I think it says like a tablespoon worth of sugar in your blood at any given time. And let's say that you've got 20 minutes worth of decent exercise. Let's say you go for a 20-minute run. Okay, you're going to burn up all that blood sugar, but no problem, because we've got another storage which is called glycogen, and glycogen is the stored sugar. So your body will start pulling glycogen out of the muscle tissue. That's where it's stored. So it stores glycogen pulls it out of the muscle tissue, and there's also a little bit in the liver. Now, once you start going through that storage, and you're sort of saying, well, I've got rid of all my blood sugar, I'm now starting to use glycogen to top up that blood sugar again and get it back to where it is. Then you start saying, well, where am I going to get the rest of my energy from? Subcutaneous fat. So that's where ketogens come in. Ketogens are basically fat cells which are turned back into energy, but the body's happy to use when it hasn't got free roaming glucose glycogen. Okay, it's mainly free sugar. So it would take some time, which is why time's so important. It would take some time for you to get through your glycogen stores, because I read somewhere there was about 200 grams in any given person, depending on the size of your muscle structure. There's about 200 grams of stored glycogen inside your muscle tissue. Yeah. So it's going to take some time, and you're always going to have some glycogen stores. It's not going to completely deplete. What you are trying to do is, if I were to take a blood sample and measure how much ketogens are inside your blood, if they're higher, that means you've got more of a diet that matches the ketogenic diet and also the intermittent fasting. So you're doubling up on the keto diet, and you're also doubling up on the keto diet and the intermittent fasting. you're using both of those as your, as your ace in the hole, because they're driving towards fat tissue loss. So you're burning body fat quite literally because of the ways in which you choose to eat and just the timings in which you choose to eat them. And that's all you're doing. And you're just making tweaks, because overall, and this is what I find with most clients, overall, they actually got quite a good thing going for them. You're just sort of saying, actually, just let's clean up the times. Do you really need to eat 5 times a day? No, let's include the protein shake in that. No, I don't need to eat 5 times a day. Okay, can we sort of swap this one out here for something different? Yeah, that's fine. Okay, pasta and rice, we're going to eat it sometimes, but we're sticking to intermittent fasting as well. So that's doubling back on us. That's our dividend. That's what we're aiming for. So that's the ketogenic diet. In basic principle, it's using the body fat storage as energy, which is what we want to do.
You're not worried too much about calories.
Okay, calories. Calories are a difficult one. Where do I start with calories? Calories are dangerous because of the types of food that we can eat and get today. So if you go into any food shop, let's go, you go into Tesco's and you pick up 5 different items, and let's say you try to even choose healthy, okay? You'll probably unknowingly picked up more calories than you actually need. But it's not quite necessarily the calories, because if I gave you too many calories, so if I gave you 200 calories more than you need, well, actually what happens is that your heart rate goes up, you tend to perspire more, you do more things, and actually your body will come back to equilibrium, okay? So if I gave you more food than you need, more calories than you need, your body will find a way to remeasure those calories back down to your weight, your base weight, okay? If I kept doing that to you, if I kept feeding you, let's say 10 times a day, just for shits and giggles, let's just say I gave you a sandwich 10 times a day, because you're doing it on a regular basis and you're not giving the body enough time to be able to catch up with the previous sandwich that you've had, you're spiking your insulin constantly, constant spiking of insulin. Insulin's there. The reason why it spikes is if you can imagine sugar going up, insulin's on its tail, following it to catch it and send it back down. It sends it back down below baseline, which is where sugar cravings come from. So when someone's had sugar, they get a big high, they get a dip, they get a crash. Their crash becomes so low, they feel like they need sugar again to get them back up. And that's where you get into this horrible rhythm. So calories are dangerous because you tend to overeat them, but it's more the fact that where calories are hidden inside addictive foods such as junk food is where the problem is. But if you were to really sort of say, let's take it from another point of view and say, I'm getting as much protein in as Chris has recommended. I'm getting the fat that I need that Chris has recommended, and I'm adding vegetables with that. I'm looking at more of a ketogenic type style diet, and I'm also looking at my intermittent fasting and taking that seriously. You don't need to worry about calories because your body is going to start to drop weight anyway because of things that you're doing.
You're saying I'm being quite conscious about what I'm eating. It looks like there's a lot of less processed foods in my diet at this point. And equally, there's less calorie-dense foods because the processed foods are very calorie-rich.
So let me tell you something, and a lot of people don't like hearing this, but it's completely true. Full fat, they love to call it full fat Coke. Coca-Cola, which has got, let's say, a full can of sugar in it. However much sugar is in a can of Coke compared to a Diet Coke. And let's just say that a Diet Coke's got aspartame in it, which is basically a sweetener. It's not the real thing. And people are really against aspartame, and I get that. It has some really, really negative press, okay? However, the research that's been done on aspartame compared to the research that's been done on sugar outweighs it. Sugar is much more metabolically dangerous than aspartame is. Although aspartame is no good for your gut biome, there isn't enough research yet, and I'm saying yet because there might well be someday, there isn't enough research yet to say that a sweetener is necessarily going to make you ill, give you cancer, type 2 diabetes, but what is definitely 100% going to give that to you is refined foods such as sugar and your amylopectinate wheat and other things of that nature, junk food, okay? let's take the fact that you sort of say, well, okay, I'm trying to lose weight, so I'll have a Diet Coke rather than a normal Coke. Okay, you're not having the calories, well done, but you're having a sweetener. Therefore, your brain receives the fact that there's something sweet and it drinks, or you drink it. There's nothing when it gets down to the stomach. There's no calories here. Like, where's the energy? I was told upstairs that it was sweet, but I'm expecting something sweet to come down. And then that's when the craving starts. So where these diet drinks can be dangerous, and that's why we're getting back onto calories, they can start a cycle of you wanting something more refined. And then you sort of say, I had a can of Coke, but actually I couldn't stop finding a biscuit and this, that, and the other, because you're like, well, that's what you want to eat because you're governing it that way. Does that make sense?
It does.
For you, calories aren't a big deal. And yes, you can use calories as a measurement. You can use it as a rough guideline, okay? You've got your basal metabolic rate, which is basically how much energy your burns per day. So where you're sitting there now, if you sat there from 6 a.m. to the following 6 a.m. on the next day, your basal metabolic rate will be X amount of calories, and it'll probably be 1,700 calories just by being you, because it costs energy to keep you alive, okay? The most amount of calories that you'll ever burn will be being alive per day, just from sitting on your backside. And then other things such as daily chores, going to work, talking, socializing, that's the next level of energy expenditure. The cherry on top is your actual exercise, what you go to the gym for. And that's the least amount of calories that you'll ever burn. And that is the most amount of work you feel like you're doing, because you're putting output in, and that's understandable, but you're only doing it between 45 minutes and an hour, okay? When you go to the gym, the other things that are underneath that balance of calories, you're still alive, I hope, at the gym. So if you're still alive, you're still breathing, but you're up-regulating. You're asking more from your system because you're lifting weights. Therefore, the baseline has got to up the amount of calories that it is. So where calories get greatly misunderstood is that your body, calories are a form of, they're a measurement of energy, much like a wattage or a voltage or something of that nature. They're just a measurement, but they're not an actual go-to. That's why the calorie diets have never worked. Calorie diets have never worked, ever, because you're not addressing the real thing. Where someone sort of says 100 calories in a Mars bar and 100 calories in a banana is exactly the same thing, it's talking absolute nonsense, because they're just not the same. They're not the same thing. They haven't got the same nutrients inside them. But nonetheless, even if it was 100 and 100, it doesn't equal to the same balance, because your biology and your evolution wasn't based on calories in food. It never was. You know, calories were only started to being measured in the late 1800s. Calories are a measurement, and they are a fallback, something to fall back on. If we want to sort of say, actually, Ben, this isn't going as well as I thought, you're telling me that you're sticking to it religiously and you're not lying. Okay, there may be something wrong in here, you know, and you can look at calories as a bit of a thing. From my personal opinion, I have spent years wasting my own time and other people's time, unfortunately, I'll be honest with you, chasing the calorie deficit. And it's a waste of time, because it's not actually what the body, the initial, like we started this video, the initial thing that you need to understand is you need to understand your hormones. Once you've got that under control, and you've already addressed it because you've sold your business now, you're focused on Ben, priority 101. So stress levels better, alcohol intake lower, yeah. So there's not so much toxin, not so much ethanol, which is in alcohol, inside your system. So your liver's not working twice as hard as it normally does. That's on the plus side. Then you're starting to look at ketogenic dieting and intermittent fasting, even more hormone rebalancing and equilibrium. The closer to equilibrium you are, trajectories is going to go like that. You're going to feel like, you're going to feel great. You're going to look great because you're going to lose that weight, but also you're not going to feel like you ever want to go back to what you were doing. And I'm not saying that what you're doing here is necessarily wrong, but if we can tweak and improve some things, but your biggest things are going to be kind of a doubling up of keto, because you're the perfect weight, you're the perfect person to be doing it, because you are already doing things, you're already kind of making changes. Some clients that I work with are so, you know, they're not in the right space, sometimes mentally, but also they're not in the right space physically, and what they know or don't know about nutrition, they're much further behind. So it takes a long time just to get them to where you started on before you came onto this podcast, just today. You're actually much further than they are. So you're in a perfect space to get to the goal that you want to achieve in the next 12 weeks, but then beyond that.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Anything else? Any other questions?
No, I look forward to putting a little program together and seeing what result we can try and achieve.
Yeah, well. All right, man. Thank you.